and Needle in the Camel's Eye. You're with Julian, getting through these reviews quite quickly today. Scream 6. Probably not a franchise that needs much acknowledgement, really. I thought the first Scream film was excellent, and they brought this paradigm of being a self-aware serial killer movie with a lot of commentary on the other films, but it was also a clever one, and it also sort of folded in the notion of, teenagers at university becoming obsessed with serial killers and doing it themselves. And the other one's kind of padded along, and I don't know that any of the other films have been particularly great, but they've all been semi-watchable. And that was Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox were the two main stars of the original ones. And last year they brought it back with a successful Scream 5 relaunch and brought Neve Campbell, who is missing from this film. Slightly unforgivably, I feel. And they're just going to make them. I had a lot of problems with that film. It was often really watchable, but the whole self-awareness thing became so grating. They constantly talked about what the film was and what other serial killer slasher films were, to an extent where it became extremely tiresome. And particularly in the last half hour, they just went on and on about what the victim would do and what normally happens in these kind of films, and it just became so over the top in its self-awareness that it's kind of folded into parody of itself. So I wouldn't say it was a great film, but it was passable. Scream 6 has come back, and we get the usual high school setup, well, not the college setup, where we get Melissa Barrera and Jenny Ortega, who are sisters. And Melissa was in the previous one, or has been, her boyfriend ended up being a serial killer himself. And a lot of the other kids in college regard her as being, through conspiracy theories, being potentially the person that orchestrated the whole thing. So she gets a lot of abuse, and her younger sister, Jenny Ortega, suffers as well and wants to go on and make a life on her own. But they're always on the watch out for if anyone is connected with these various kill sprees over the years, inspiring someone else to come after them and so on. And Courtney Cox turns up as the same reporter that she's been in all of them. So, I mean, the stories are analogous to each other every single time. Someone is wearing a Scream mask and going around killing people, and it's obscure who it might really be, and there's going to be a big twist towards the end that it's one of their friends and so on. Which is essentially every Scream movie. And that's what happens here. We get a cop. Who's the cop played by? Dermot Mulroney, who's probably one of the bigger names here, and his daughter, who, Jasmine Savoy Brown, is that her? Who plays Quinn? Oh, Liana Liberato. She's one of the standouts of the film. She plays the cop's daughter who lives in the same student digs as the Jenny Ortega and the Melissa Barrera characters. And we get the same thing happening where we get the opening. So the opening of the first Scream was iconic. With the whole phone call situation. I think Drew Barrymore, very iconic sequence, one of the most memorable probably of any Scream sequence. This time around we get an Aussie actress, I can't remember what her name is, sitting at a bar, and she gets a phone call from her Tinder date, who she doesn't know what he looks like, and he manages through the course of the conversation to coax her into coming outside. Not the stupidest thing that any of the people in this movie do by an enormous margin. But it is actually the best sequence in the film, but they also overplay it as well. Because you do know what's coming. It's just that if they'd have done it better, it would have been a really, really great sequence. But from that point on, we know that there is someone else, a new person wearing the famous Scream mask, going around killing people, but very quickly fixating on Melissa and Jenny, the two sisters who were involved in previous rounds of the Scream murders, and gradually knocking off her friends and classmates and roommates and people one by one, and who is the Scream mask this time. There's so many things wrong with this film. So one of the things is it claims to be really, really self-aware and suffers from that painful verbosity when it comes to talking about other films whilst doing them itself. So the characters act in a very stupid manner throughout, to the point where you're putting your head in your hands as to how stupid can they be. And the incredulous nature of the world they live in is almost like the John Wick movies, where the police aren't really there. They only turn up at crime scenes after things have happened. So you've got this lead girl, Melissa, who is not only the next potential victim of a mass serial killer, but also one of the suspects for being that serial killer, left to her own devices to hang out and have dinner parties with her friends, with no police presence at all. They're just left alone, even though murders have already been building up. It's so incredulously stupid. Like the police wouldn't have at least put someone there or put them in protective custody. But no, apparently, even though there have been several bloody murders and she was not only connected to the previous murders but is a suspect in the current ones, they let them go about their daily life to be frequently preyed upon. So that really, really ruined this film for me, because it is so unbelievably stupid all the way through, yet claims to be meta and self-aware, and we're going to tell you what normally happens in this kind of film, but they do it to such a trite extent anyway. So it really did ruin this film for me. It's so frequently bafflingly stupid that it would have worked better had they just done a parody of slasher movies and not made the point of, we know what slasher movies are like, all the way through, continually. And one of the characters just did it all the time, like weighing up who would be next or who was the most likely to be the villain. And again, they do such stupid things, like the people they have around them for very weak reasons as well. It's like there's a sequence in it where they get on a train and they all have to stay together to be safe. So they get on one train and they're not even looking after each other getting on the train. So the crowd pushes them apart, so two of them have to get on the next train. So they're split up, creating this incredibly dangerous event, which had no reason to happen in any way. And the logical, given that they're talking to each other on their phone, get off the train and get on the next one. But apparently that's impossible. So they leave those two people to become prey of the serial killer. So it is so mind-blowingly stupid. It's also not very interesting. It doesn't offer any originality in any of the kills. They're really rote. And I would expect nothing. The absolute baseline here is that they actually brought up some interesting new kills or some interesting deaths in the film, and it just doesn't happen. The slight saving grace here is that the last 15 minutes are probably the best in the film. You do get a semi-reasonable twist and some semi-reasonable kills in that final 15 minutes, but it's far too late by that stage. Melissa Barrera's fine. She's beautiful and fairly anonymous, but it's totally fine. The one that has a great spark here is Jenny Ortega, who's now a massive star after the series Wednesday, and you can see why. She's the one with the live wire spark. None of their other friends stand out at all, apart from that one I mentioned, Liana Liberato, who I thought it's almost like a role I could imagine Karen Gilliam doing 10 years ago. I thought she was really, really good. Her and Jenny Ortega really stood out. But overall, it is so rote. It tries to be a commentary and, a self-aware parody of something that is a low-rent version of itself. So sadly, you might find some entertainment as a once through, but I'm going to give Scream 6 a 3.5 out of 10.